Hey, take it away, please. Lots of excitement today.
No challenges, right? No challenges.
Challenge 3. We're presenting the solution today, right?
There's a challenge.
Yeah. But it's posted, yeah?
I see no challenges in Slack or E3.
No, wait, what?
I thought
we are not aware that there has been a challenge.
I see. I died. Very good, guys. That's my. It's good. It's good. Thank you for telling me. Because I forgot to post it. Very good. Very good. So it's my fault. Very good. Very good.
I thought it was because the intense midterm month and
yes. No, it's on purpose. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah. No problem. You know, guys. Sometimes when you grow up, there are so many things to do. So challenge 3, I'll post it now. Okay, so just tell me how you guys did for the group team members, how we went. Go ahead, tell me a little bit about that.
And I contact some of the group member before, and the people I thought is very good, and I contact them, telling them if we can group up together or not, and they said, "Oh yeah, that's pretty good." And I thought you were a pretty good leader. And some.
Wow, really? They told you that? Are you just lying to me? No way. They told you you're a pretty good leader?
I maybe just do some exaggeration, but something like that, you know. So yeah, and the group member I contact is pretty good. Like one of them is very good at doing slides. I think you know who am I talking about, and he's not EE background or
what's his background? What's his background?
It's about art. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
why is he taking? Is this person here? Why are they taking the class?
Yeah, he's here. His name is Barry.
Barry, can you come talk to us and tell us about your background in art? Tell us, Barry, what type of artist are you? Since you're not a coding artist like us. Barry, come talk to us, yeah? Can you talk to us?
He unmuted himself, but I think his mic is not on.
Let's see. Let's give him a second. Sorry for not posting the. Sorry to myself for not posting the challenge. I prepared it and I finished it and I didn't post it.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
There's so many things going on, but yeah, I'm happy you enjoyed this happy accident. Okay, very good. So just tell us, Barry, what's your background? Are you a visual artist? Are you a sculptor? Are you an artist of the comedy arts? Are you an actor? Are you a comedian? Sculpture. Wow, very good. What do you use to sculpt? Wood, stone, metal, plastic. Tell us. Art and craft department. So you have in Taiwan, you have high schools for arts and craft? Really? Very good. So Barry, let me tell you, we love bicycles in this lab. I think the design of bicycle frames will really fit your final project. You know, I think you can come to the lab and we can discuss the design of a bicycle frame. I think it will be your perfect final project. Yeah. Very good. Very good. So is your background enough to follow the programming, to follow the math of the class? Do you just study by yourself? Yeah, tell me just a little bit. I said, is the background that you gained in high school enough to carry you through the course now, or do you have to do a lot of catch up with the material of the class? Okay. Of course not. I had to catch up a lot. Yeah, I wonder if, because the class, of course, it's a lab, right? So it doesn't stress any theoretical knowledge, right? But yeah, I just wonder how is your learning process. One day you'll tell me how is your learning process. Very good, very good. I'm very happy for you. I hope that you're enjoying the class. And remember my offer to do a final project on bicycle frames. If you come to my office, you will see more bicycle frame than books, I think. Okay, very good. We heard from group B, from group A. Let's see it from group B a second, guys. Let's see. Is group B here?
Hi.
Tell us something, yeah? Again, apologies for not posting the challenge like a genius that I am. But yeah, go ahead. Tell me something.
We found that the challenge didn't post on the channel, and we discussed it. Then we wait for it. Yeah.
So you didn't tell me that I forgot. It's like, oh, professor, why there is no challenge? You prefer to choose silence so that you wouldn't have to work. Is that correct?
We think that you were so nice that you want us to take a break after the midterm week.
Correct.
That's why we think to give us some time to take a break.
Yeah,
so
to enjoy. Yeah,
we
to enjoy.
Then remind you.
Yeah, of course. Why reminding me? Yeah, of course. Tell me, do you have everybody in the group? Are you guys? How did you choose the people in the group eventually? Just tell me. Yeah.
All team members in my group are my classmates or my team members' friends, so we know each other and we live in the same dorm. So sometimes if we cannot discuss by line group, we can just go to their room to talk to them in person. So I think the problem of discussion may be not so hard. Yeah.
In the same dorm, can discuss it. Is there something that you miss that, like, through the class there was not much in-person interaction? Is there something that you thought about?
You say in the class?
Yeah, because in class it's all online, right? So I was wondering if you missed meeting in person and interacting with your classmates.
Oh, because we have line groups, so I think we have a lot of chance to interact.
But did you miss interacting in person? Did you miss interacting in person with the other students?
Not really.
Good. Yeah, because some students say that the class is nice and all, but some students, they miss the interaction with the other students, right? They say that that's part of the reason why people come to university, right? Also to socialize with others.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, perfect. Okay, let's see it from group C. Again, let me apologize in person to the group. Group C, are you guys here? Group C. Group C. Group C.
Hello.
Hello.
But I don't know where our team leader is. Where is our leader?
No worries. You can just tell me, like, how do you guys got together? How did you guys met each other?
Because in our group, the leader has posted on the Slack whether if anyone want to join his team, and I go ask him, can I join his team? And he's like disappear for like a week, and then he take all of us into his week today. So yeah, there's not actually any progress. And also that I was thinking about why is there no challenge 3.
I was being nice to you guys. Yeah, I was letting you rest for a week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so no communication. So hopefully the leader comes back. It's a little bit more engaging with you guys, and yeah. But do you know the other people in the group? Yeah, did you work with them before?
I don't know any of our group because I'm not this. I'm not EE, and
What are you?
yeah, I'm DBT.
Are you?
DBT, biological technology.
Oh,
The department. Yeah. So like I'm not actually doing anyone in this class. So yeah.
well, but you had. I mean, first of all, you work with some other people in the previous challenges, right? So do you interact?
Yeah. Yes, but I think there's no other member in the group C was same group member I in the challenge 0 to challenge 2.
And for BET, what do you do for fun? I mean, what type of, do you have a focus?
No, actually, because I'm joining this class because I'm doing some quant stuff and I want to learn more about the machine learning.
Okay, but you don't have a specific topic for your master. You're a bachelor or master student? You're a bachelor?
No, I'm just college student. I'm just two.
So in the class is accessible to you, right? You can follow the material, right?
Yeah.
Okay, very nice. Nice to meet you. So hopefully, yeah. So I posted the challenge again. Apologies. Hopefully you guys are gonna have a good group and you're gonna talk to each other very soon. Okay, group D. You guys are around? Is group D here? Is group D here? Group D. Is the leader of group D here? Okay, group D is a no-show. Let me see last week. Group B, no-show. Okay, not good. Group E, is group E here?
Yes. Hello.
Tell us a little bit, yeah.
Yes, we found together a new group. It is mainly the group I was in period 3 with, and some other people are added with as well a Singaporean background, I think. I'm from Holland, but they are all from Singapore, I think. I'm not sure, but I think so.
You have to tell them, please, to talk more slowly. You know, the Singaporean, I mean, I don't want to discriminate, okay? I'm not discriminating against Singaporean. But usually the English that they speak is so fast that it's like it's hitting me like a...
We can't keep up.
Exactly, I cannot keep up. My old brain cannot keep up. So please tell them, you know, leave a comment in the slides, you know, talk for the poor old man.
Slow.
Okay.
Yes, that's it, I think.
Okay. Very good. So group D is not here. Yeah, sorry, again, apologies for not posting the challenge. There are many things that are happening, and sometimes, because I usually work in the challenge on Saturday morning, or like on Friday morning, and sometimes in the mornings I'm not as efficient. So let's just do something different. Let's just discuss the challenge together before we do the presentation now, before we go to some material, and then you tell me if you prefer to present the challenge, because sometimes I did. Go ahead.
I'm the group F, and last time we discussed about that I want to join group C, and yes, there is no any other members now in my team.
Okay.
So I will join group C because I already have talked about with our team leaders.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So come again. Which team are you? Which team?
F.
Yes. Of course. I already. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. I saw my note from last time. Yes. Okay. So let's do this. So let's see. Let's try to do this, and then you guys tell me if it's good. Because usually I drop the challenges and I let you guys go to the challenges by yourself, and that's because I do not know when to present the challenge, you know, because usually the material of the challenge is the material of like one class or two classes before. And so it's like if I present the challenge in class, it sort of breaks the flow of the teaching because I have to move back to material that we already did in class. And so usually I do not present. But if you guys tell me that you like it, then we can go through it. So notice that when I share the challenge, I usually share a comment link, right? So you can leave a comment if there is some mistakes, some errors, and so on and so forth. No problem. Okay, so this link is again on the MovieLens dataset, and it's 100K, MovieLens 100K. And in this case, we're going to do PCA, right? So first we start with SVD, which is sort of the theoretical background of PCA. Then we do PCA. Then we do NMF, non-negative matrix factorization. And this is a technique for matrix decomposition in which we impose that the elements of the matrix in which, the element, the PC, basically the equivalents of the PCA elements are positive. Okay, so positive defined. So it's another example of a positive defined constraint, and now it changes the problem. And then we do the Poisson matrix factorization, right? So you already saw the Poisson, let's say the role of the Poisson distribution in data science in the previous challenge, right? So you already understand that in a Poisson setting, we're going to have some integer numbers and some. I think you know what to expect. So the MovieLens, these guys, you should already be familiar with it, right? So you already know when the data were collected, what type of scale was given, how many users. So this is just there. And of course, like there is already a loader in Python, so you don't have to worry about it. Then we start the discussion with SVD, right? So if you take a ranking matrix, you divide the ranking matrices U delta V, where this is the delta is a diagonal matrix. These are the left eigenvectors. These are the right eigenvectors. So you should have done SVD in principle. And the idea is that what you do is that you take this diagonal matrix and you carry it down to the first k elements in the diagonal. The rest you put 0 everywhere else, so that then you have an approximation of the matrix R as a R hat, in which you just take the first k left eigenvectors, the first k eigenvalues, and the first k right eigenvectors, and you do the inner product. And and that's how you produce an approximation of the matrix. And the idea is that the size of this approximation will be, will be a factor k of the original representation. Okay, so you save space in the representation. So you can imagine that maybe this has this is a diagonal of, let's say, 100 elements. You just take 3, so you have a space, a memory saving, and a complexity saving of 93%, substantial. So something that is nice for you guys to understand is the complexity of SVD. This is something that usually you don't do too much in class unless you take some numerical recipe class. But basically, there is a QR decomposition. So Q will be lower diagonal, R will be upper diagonal matrices, and there are this beautiful householder matrix multiplication that you can use to do the decomposition. Maybe you can think it's something similar to Gaussian elimination. So it works well. And the idea is that you have to be very efficient numerically, because of course, when you deal with a matrix like this one here, you have hundreds of thousands of movies. So you need something that is computationally very efficient. And then there is something that we don't have time to discuss in this class. But basically, people understood that you could have a random approach, let's say, to the way in which you construct the SVD dimension. And by introducing some randomization, you can drastically decrease the complexity of the singular value decomposition by introducing a little bit of error in the representation. So something that is always true in data science as a overarching principle is that if you want an exact algorithm, the exact algorithm, if you want an exact algorithm, the exact algorithm is going to have a certain complexity in terms of memory and computation. If you are happy to use an approximate algorithm that gives you some epsilon guarantees about the solution being close to the true one, then you can drastically reduce complexity in terms of memory and computation just by introducing some error in the solution, okay? And this catching is something that is very much in this direction, okay? So you're happy to reduce the complexity of SVD of a factor 10 by introducing, let's say, a 1% error, something of this sort, okay? Then also people have started working on extension of the SVD on higher dimensions. So SVD is applied to matrices that have rows and columns. Why do we stop there? Everything is high dimensional in our life. So we could add a pipe, okay? We could add a third dimension of the matrix in which the indexes would be I, J, K. I is the row, K is the column, P is the index of the pipe. So you can imagine that now you're operating with a queue. And analog algorithms to SVD also hold in this higher dimension, okay? And this is called, that has different names as LDA or tensor decomposition. And there are the theory behind this tensor decomposition is actually very beautiful. Many things to understand. The algorithms are very complex, but I think there is a lot of space for beautiful results in the, let's say, application of SVD to higher order tensors. And so if you want to go, just go for this, go look up this tensor decomposition. And of course, when we use Python, NumPy and SciPy, they're very optimized numerical algorithms for this operation. And so there is a lot of beauty in the numerical recipes that are used for these decompositions, and they are so usually transparent to you, right? You just call an SVD method. Python does whatever it has to do in order to figure out what is the best algorithm to use for this matrix density, for this magnitude of the elements, for these dimensions, and everything is it's hidden from your view. Good. Then we go to the following problem, right? So let's say that you want to take a decomposition of the matrix, right? So you want to take a projection of the matrix into a lower dimensional space using this matrix U, right? And you want to do this projection so that you minimize the Frobenius norm, okay? So the F is the Frobenius norm. The Frobenius norm of a matrix is the sum of the elements squared, okay? So you're doing this operation. You have a unitary matrix U, which is a projection matrix. So what you do is that you take the original ranking matrix and you hit it with a projection to a lower dimensional space. And then you do a reconstruction by multiplying with the U. And you want to choose the U so that you minimize the error, right, in compression and reconstruction, okay? So the U is not. So if the U is a square matrix, then this is uninteresting, right? Because you would just take a U to be a unitary matrix and everything will be done. Of course, you will take a U to be a square unitary matrix and everything will be done. Of course, the more interesting case in which U, it's a skinny matrix, it's a tall matrix, meaning that the U transpose will take a dimension, let's say 100, and bring it down to dimension 3. And then this reconstruction will be take these 3 elements and bring them up to a dimension 100. So that what you're doing is that you're projecting a high dimensional matrix into a low dimensional space. And you want to do this so that the error in reconstruction is minimized. And of course, this error, you have to measure it in some meaningful way. And what we do is this Frobenius norm. Very good. So it turns out, right, that the best way to do this is indeed to take the matrix U to be this matrix from the decomposition, right? To be the first K eigenvalue of this, okay? So remember that these are eigenvectors. And so if the matrix is, and so this is how you build the matrix U in this case. Very good. So PCA is since it's very intuitive and numerically very efficient. and it provides a certain amount of interpretability of the results. Is used everywhere. Okay, so if you talk to anybody that does some aspect of data science or data exploration, they will be using it they will be using PCA every day. So of course, finance, genomics. Oh, sorry guys. Finance, genomics, signal processing, marketing, neurological stuff. Everybody uses PCA, right? So it's one of the most commonly used algorithms used in, let's say, in data science. So this part shows you how you go from SVD to PCA. And the idea, the way you have to remember is that you have to center the data, right? So first of all, you have to remove rows and columns. Sorry, you have to basically make the rows a zero mean. So you have to sort of translate your data set back to a zero mean. And then you take the top K principal component from the SVD decomposition. You build this matrix. And basically, this is the solution to your minimization problem. And the sketch of the proof is actually very, very neat. It depends on the fact that if you are taking a Frobenius norm and you hit a matrix with a unitary matrix, then the Frobenius norm will not change. Very good. Good. So for these PCA dimensions, right? So they come from the SVD. Usually, you can have all sorts of troubles. Let's say. You can have very small eigenvalues, very large dimension, some numerical instability here and there. But the biggest problem that PCA has is that this decomposition, right, consider both positive and negative elements. And as we saw last time, there are many contexts in which it makes no sense to have positive and negative elements as part of your decomposition, right? Because when you decompose something, in a sense, you want to recover some latent information. You want to recover a representation in a smaller space that generates the representation that you get to observe. So it's like saying there are these few elements, there are these few data sources that create a very large image or a very large set of observation. And if I were able to reconstruct correctly this latent space, then I will gain a very compact representation of my data. Okay, so if you think about it in this way, then it's clear that there's this negativity. It's very bothersome, right? It's conceptually, it's an obstacle to this interpretation of your decomposition. So you guys saw the example of the wine, right? Let's say that you do PCA and you get that you have a negative contribution of acidity to something. But of course, no, acidity is not a good idea because there is acidity. There is acid and base, right? So that you can have something which is both positive and negative. So let's take, for example, alcohol level. Very good. And you do the decomposition, and you get that you can interpret the quality of the wine using some PCA components that contain alcohol as one of the elements in the eigenvector. And then you will have the negative contribution of let's say of alcohol. So it's as if the alcohol can be negative, right? So there cannot be an absence of alcohol, or it can only be a presence of alcohol, right? It doesn't make sense that you contribute a negative amount of alcohol to something. So let me give another example. Image decomposition. Let me give you another example, which is sort of classic. So I usually use to show people. It should be this. This one should be this. These are sparse components. Good. Okay, good. So let's just share this. Okay, so let's say that you do the following exercise. You're given a data set of faces, and you vectorize these faces. So now let's say they become a vector of 724 because it's whatever 12 by 12 image, 24 by 24 image. And then what you do, is that you apply PCA, and what you do is that you extract the PCA dimension of the images, right? Then you will see that the dictionary of the PCA components, right? So the eigenvector that you're using to reconstruct the image of faces will have the following interpretation. So here the red is negative values and blue are positive values. So if you look at this decomposition, right, it's saying the pixel, so these are black and white images, right? So each pixel, it corresponds to a pixel intensity. Of course, there is no negative pixel intensity, there is only a positive pixel intensity. And this type of factors are saying, oh, well, if you want to construct any face from the dataset, so these are faces from the dataset, what you can do is that you can use this sort of prototype face, right? That has shadow on the left of the face, right? And then you sum it to this other face that removes the beard from the prototype face, and then you can add this component that puts the shadow on the other side of the face. Okay, so you understand that these prototype PCA components that you're using to reconstruct the image add and remove pixel intensity. And of course, this is very undesirable, because if you will want to have an interpretation of this face, right, you will just want to have the interpretation of the face in terms of positive components, right? So you just add features to the face. You just consider, let's say, the shadow casted by something, not as if part of the face will produce illumination and remove intensity, right? So what you do is that you can say, well, what happens if I restrict myself to the PCA components that are element-wise positive, right? So then, of course, what you're saying is that you construct a face in the dataset by superposing, positive features. And this is how you will, let's say, recover the dictionary, right? So you will have that, for example, this adds a shadow on the nose, these components add eyebrows, these components add, let's say, shadow to the right of the face, this component adds a shadow under the cheek produced by the eyebrow, this component adds beard, these components add even more beard. So you see that you reconstruct a more interpretable, right? A more interpretable set of latent component. Very good. I understand why you say that this is a nightmare fuel. Indeed, it is nightmare fuel. So this brings us to NMF. And you will think that NMF, being such a natural idea, right? It was invented by some French mathematician in the 1300s, right? And instead, the landmark paper was in 1999. So imagine that there was such a natural formulation of a problem that was connected to such natural consideration on the representation of data, and it remained substantially unexplored until 1999, right? It's like saying that there was a chemical element that wasn't discovered until 2025, right? I mean, it's unthinkable in a sense, right? So SVD, PCA, matrix decomposition, they have a history which is hundreds of years. And this simple variation of the problem, which is so insightful, was unknown until the 2000s. And in fact, I remember, because I'm not as young as you guys, I remember when the paper came out and a lot of people started working on the theoretical background for NMF and proving theorems and doing applications and coming up with algorithms. It was like a crazy 10 years when everybody rushed to try to understand this new decomposition. So this is to say that, yeah, you shouldn't imagine that everything have been discovered, that we're just doing research at the boundaries of knowledge, or that all good ideas need to be complex ideas, that you need to study 15 years topology and 25 years manifold in order to have a good idea, right? So something very, very simple would work. And of course, the formulation simply is that the elements of the decomposition, they have to be positive defined, right? So you want to approximate the matrix as a left-hand side multiplied by a right-hand side, and you want this left-hand side and this right-hand side to be positive. Of course, we like zeros, right? Especially when it comes to matrix multiplication. And so what you can do is that you can also add a Lagrangian to further push the elements in omega and elements in H toward the 0 using an L1 regularization that we've seen in the class before. Or you can take some other measure of divergence, right? And basically try to come to the composition of the matrix in this sense. So the formulation, this formulation is convex, right? So the formulation is, so if you fix omega, if you fix W, you fix H, the problem is convex. So you know that you can use some sort of gradient inspired algorithm and do well. Of course, it's not convex in both arguments because it will be too nice. And also, if you add this regularization, you're summing convex plus convex problem, which is not convex. So you lose convexity. So of course, there are many people have worked on this. It's an interesting set of algorithms that one can develop to recover these components and so on and so forth. Anyway, makes sense. So now what you can do is that you can go back to the understanding of the MovieLens dataset that you had originally, where in a sense you didn't have this matrix algebra and latent decomposition tools to understand the problem. You can do this, right? Or you can go down to the decomposition of the MovieLens dataset using NMF. You can use PCA. You can see what is the error that you obtain into the two different representation. See if you can interpret the non-negative components that you obtain with NMF. The usual cute things, right? Because of course you pay. It's clear that the NMF decomposition, right? It's a subset of a PCA decomposition, meaning that the class of matrix decomposition that you do with PCA is strictly larger than the type of decomposition that you can achieve with NMF. Because in a sense, NMF is PCA plus a constraint. So you are reducing the set of feasible solution. So you are going to be hit in terms of approximation error. So NMF will naturally have a larger approximation error. The question is this approximation error an epsilon, or is this a substantial change of power in the decomposition? Very good. So then you go in and you do regularize NMF. You can try to control the sparsity of the solution of NMF using regularization, usual stuff. Here, there is another benefit, right? That if you use regularized NMF, then the prototype, let's say, representation you're going to use to describe your users in the dataset will assign a 0 score to a lot of movies. And this is very desirable in the MovieLens dataset because it's clear to you that some users, they are missing the ranking of a movie because really they will never watch the movie, okay? So if you do PCA, let's say the PCA will tell you that, of course, some nonsense like that the person will rate a movie negatively, which is not possible. But it will also tell you that, for example, everybody has a potential rating of a movie, even if the potential rating is very, very small. Okay, but if you add the regularization, then this element will be forced to 0, and the interpretation will be, oh, the user will never watch the movie, right? Somebody that watches some sort of horror movie will never sit down and watch a romantic comedy. Okay, something of that type, which is of course powerful. And so you can try to do different elements of regularization, see how many elements are you pushing to exactly to 0, compare dense and sparse version, see if this improves clustering performance, if this improves interpretability of the components, and then you can do some clustering. You guys already did some clustering of the users, and you understand the users that give high rankings, the student users that are more, they give a lot of rankings and so on. So you can go back and reinterpret the clusters that you will observe by clustering PCA and MF dimension in this understanding that you have of the dataset. And then, of course, our Poisson case, which is a little bit the theme of the class. And the idea is that when we look at SVD and PCA, in SVD, we assume that there is sort of a Gaussian noise in the representation. So the true, let's say, ranking that you observe is obtained by the combination of the PCA components plus some junction noise. In the NMF, maybe somebody will consider some binomial, some non-negative, I don't know, some Laplacian distribution of the noise, some let's say some positive distribution of the noise. But of course, we really like to have Poisson noise, right? Because Poisson will give us some sort of integer numbers. And so what you do here is that you use your beautiful Poisson decomposition, and this is something that I'll let you dig a little bit into it. So you like that, so that the prediction will be the exact ranting plus noise. And then as the last one will be this, right, will be to consider the composition in which you change the type of noise that you have here, right? So you will have, let's say, L1 noise, infinity norm, 2-1 norm, nuclear norm. And then I want you to try to think what type of decomposition you will obtain with using different type of noises, right? And try to see if the choice of the loss function in the approximation will sort of drive your interpretation. And then you can, of course, try to find the optimal solution using some gradient descent, some subgradient methods, some proximal methods, some programming, this type of stuff. ChatGPT will help you. And then, the way you see the performance of everything is that you use MAE, RMSE, very good. Precision and recall, right? So you want to know the error on the top recommendations, right? And then, so you try to visualize the latent representation using clustering. For example, using k-means. We haven't done k-means in class, but I think should be familiar to you guys. And then remember that you're using this method for some unsupervised discovery, and then try to have some thoughts of how you want to. What is the unsupervised approach that you are trying to take, right? So you have this very large dimensional data. You want to find the low dimensional representation because you want to reveal some of the elements that are relevant to you guys, and then how do you judge the interpretability of the latent representation that you obtain? Okay, very good, guys. So this is the interpretation of this is the explanation of the challenge. As I said, I usually do that. Yeah, go ahead. Question.
I just want to know when we then hand this in. Is it for next week or the week after?
This is the class has to decide, right? So I mean, I would like to next week. And I know that let me think about the set of incentives, right? Because if I tell you next week, because my first incentive was, or my first thought was to let you guys vote. But why wouldn't you guys vote to do it in 2 weeks simply because you get more time to do it? So I cannot let you vote on this. I think let's do next week. Okay.
There's next week. A lot of people have not found team members yet, like Group D or Group F.
But I think, I mean, like I think these students will not start working on forming groups if we give them 2 weeks. Right? I think they're still not going to do anything for the first week and then try to do it still in the second week, right? Does it mean that, right?
Yeah.
They've got 2 weeks to find partners, right? So
yeah.
Can we do next week then, guys? Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, very good, guys. So let me. Somebody's sending me hearts. Very good. I see that you're very happy to have 1 week for the challenge. I think, honestly, right? I think it's a lot of fun, and you already know the data set, so you should already have most of the code for processing the data. So yeah, I think you can go ahead and do it like this. Okay, guys, let me take a little bit of a break. You guys go walk around, and then we come back and we do some material. Okay. I'll see you back in 7 minutes. 05 we start again. Ciao, guys. Very good, guys. Any comments before we go? Yes, so Gaida is back here, so I'll tell Gaida to put the deadline for the submission on next Friday. That's your plan, Gaida? That's your plan?
Wait, does it arrive here? I mean, without sign?
We found a carnaceous plant outside of the lab, and we didn't know who put it there. Now we know it's Gaida. Okay, very good, guys. Let's go through this decision trees. Okay, so remember that we finished last time with the logistic regression, and we introduced logistic regression because we wanted to work on the classification problem, right? So we said regression is nice, but regression is not the full set of problems that we want to face. There is the case in which we want to predict a label, and the label as quantitative. They are qualitative, they are not quantitative. So there is no clear distinction. There is no clear relationship between, let's say, class A, B, C. There could be 3 orthogonal things that doesn't make sense to compare. So you cannot put them in a scale. So you cannot use regression when you do that. And so this is how we introduced the classification problem. And now we did logistic regression. We saw the interpretation for the binary decision case. We talk about type 1 error, type 2 error, precision, recall. This is also in the challenge. Very good. So let's go through the motivation together, decision trees, classification trees, splitting criteria, stopping conditions, and pruning. Okay, so again, what we were in the last time. Remember that we had this beautiful plot where we saw the decision region of a logistic regressor. And we said, well, the decision region, right, where the model predicts a 0.5, is going to be a linear boundary. And this linear boundary is supposed to split the let's say, the positive and negative samples throughout some sort of separating hyperplane. And so this is what we expect, right? So we said we have a space, let's say 2-dimensional, just for simplicity. We have blue dot and we have a red dot, blue dot, and we want to blue dots. We want to create a hyperplane that separates them, and this is a hyperplane. Of course, remember when we use this representation, we add the constant 1 as one of the coefficient. And then, so that the equation for the hyperplane, we don't need to carry around any silly constant term. So a simple vector product is sufficient. Very good. Okay, so this is how you visualize this. So you have 0 and 1s, and you have a separating hyperplane between the two. Okay, good. Very good. Then we said already last time, we said, well, this is all nice and good, but of course, linear boundaries are uninteresting, right? So we started spicing it up, and we said, well, we can use polynomial terms, we can use a correlation term, and then this will give you some, let's say, some polynomial decision boundary. But of course, you don't really want to introduce too high of a degree, because this will give you too many degrees of freedom. This will correspond in a risk of overfitting. And so we were there debating, right, as always, that now if we add this hyperparameter of, let's say, the highest degree that we are happy with, then we will have to do cross-validation to figure out how to choose this hyperparameter. When we do cross-validation, then we are consuming data, and we are consuming resources in order to check this parameter. So it's somewhat of a trade-off, you know, in terms of efficiency. And of course, there are things that we will never obtain with this polynomial regression, which are boundaries of as follows. So we will never have, let's say, a checkerboard type of decision region like this, and then we will never have a circle, okay? Because the equation of the circle does not fall into this. Very good, very unhappy. So a lot of decision boundary we will not be able to do. And they cannot be described with an equation. So even if we try to change the equation that we put in the exponent, right, in that likelihood formulation, in that log odds formulation, we will not be able to easily describe non-convex region. Let's say that the math that we usually use, it's limited to sort of convex boundaries using few parameters, right? Just as the general statement. Okay, anyway, so it's clear what we want to do, right? We would like to have a complex decision boundary, okay, which is described by relatively few parameters, so that then once the model is being trained, then we can go down and try to interpret the decision boundary. Okay, very good. And then we understand this plot. I hope that you guys know. Do you guys know what is WD-40? I think my friend Barry, my artist friend Barry, will know what is WD-40, since I suspect he's the one that has most experience with. Yeah. Do you guys know what is WD-40? 01? 0/1? Of course. Have you ever used WD-40? Exactly. Of course. So I mean, it happened to me maybe last week. There was something stuck, and I had to go through it anyway. So this is saying that this is how engineers see a problem, right? Does it move? Yes or no? Should it move? Yes or no? And if it doesn't move or it should, then you use WD-40, which is degree. It's basically just an oil, right? And if it moves and it doesn't, then we should use this tape, right? So this is nylon tape, M3 tape, you know. And the idea is that we have many different formulations of this type of flowcharts, right? And they're very humanly interpretable, right? Because we can revert to the law. We can sort of interpret the logic that brought to a certain decision split in the flowchart. But still, they can give you a sufficient complexity, because it's clear that the number of leaves grows exponentially with the number of levels in the pyramid. Let's say the number of levels in the flowchart. So you have an explainability that grows exponentially with the depth of your flowchart. And we could still, let's say, try to attach a decision boundary which is linear in each of the leaves, in each of the outcomes of the flowchart, and we will retain, let's say, mathematical simplicity once we get to the leaf. And this brings us to the mathematical formulation of decision trees. Boing. So the mathematical structure that we have built through our history of mathematics to describe flowcharts and successive decision and sequential decision making is a decision tree, which is a formal decision model, which is represented by a tree. A tree is formed by nodes that have parents and children, and the internal nodes are the nodes that have at least children. And then the idea is that from each of the nodes you can have multiple children that depart from there, and this is a branching. And so sometimes we also use the, let's say, either a genealogical tree. So we talk about parents and children, ancestors and descendants. And sometimes we use more of a nature-inspired terminology, and we talk about leaves and roots. Okay, so the idea is that the tree will start from a root. The root is the parent, is the node that has no parents, and it goes to the leaves, and the leaves are the nodes with no children. Okay, so the idea is that whatever node is not a leaf node, there will be an internal node. And we can now construct a data science, a machine learning model, a data science model that does the following. You start from you have a sequential decision to take, and somebody gives you a sample, and you will do the following. You will look at the sample. You will compare the sample to the root node, and the root node will contain some sort of condition. that depends on the features that are the input features to your model, and you will decide in which direction to go. For simplicity, we usually go for binary trees, so the decision will be a yes or a no, and then you will go to the next node, which is associated with a certain answer, and you will repeat the process until you get to a leaf node. Once you get to a leaf node, then you are assigned to a class. Okay. Very simple conceptually, right? So the idea is that each of this would be our tree. So a sample gets here. We do some tests on the sample. We go left or right, and we keep descending until we get to a leaf, and then we call. When we get to the end, then we do an assignment to a certain class. Okay, very good. So let's take a simple example here, in which the input to the dataset is a fruit, and you have the width and the height of the fruit, and you have to decide what type of fruit it is. So if the width is sufficiently large, then you check the height. If the height is if sufficiently large, then you will decide for an orange. If it's too small, then you will decide for a lemon. Okay, so very simple, but just to get you guys started. And then we can go down to the representation again on the two-dimensional space and see which decision boundary we have. So in this case, right, we analyze one feature at each step. The first step, we analyze the width. The second step, we analyze the height. And this is true for all levels. Of course, we can consider general structures, but that's not the case now. So in the first node, we are having a vertical separation, right, that slices the x-axis in this plot in two. And in the second one, we have a y-axis separation, and we have two different conditions. So you see that the boundary that we are drawing is sort of this jigsaw puzzle looking boundary. So we're trying to put all the oranges in these two boxes and all the lemons in these two boxes. And it's clear that now, once the model has been clarified, we have the problem of optimizing the model, right? So deciding what to do, which decision to take at each of the nodes, so then we can come up with an algorithm that selects the best parameter for the job. Boom. Proseguiamo. So, given a training set, we want to learn the decision tree model for a binary classification. So what we want to do is that we want to promote the optimal partition of the feature space with axes aligned to the linear boundaries. We start from the simple model. We don't allow, we don't allow boundaries that are other than linear for the following discussion. And for each region, we predict one of the label based on the largest class that belongs to that region. Okay. Again, we just consider a binary classification for a simple case. We could have more classes that doesn't affect the discussion that we're going to have next. Okay, so now we have to learn the model. Let's consider a little bit the hyperparameter of the problem. Of course, one of the hyperparameters will be the depth of the tree. Of course, we understand very well that if we let the tree have a very large depth, then we're going to have an exponential number of leaves, so that the type of decision boundary that we'll end up drawing will be exponentially large. And all this is very undesirable for us, because we know what the price that we're paying. We're paying with overfitting, and we're paying with complexity. So we want to start somewhere and have a criteria by which we add leaves to the node, we add levels to the node in a very principled manner, so that we avoid overfitting and unnecessary complexity. So this is going to, of course, add a hyperparameter. So we have to be wary of the growth of hyperparameter in our model. Okay, we want to really curb the use of hyperparameters. So simplest approach is to start with an empty decision tree. So the feature space is undivided. So the space just belongs to one class. And then we choose the optimal predictor, which splits the data in the most promising way. and decide the optimal threshold for this. And then we repeat this operation, we recurse over this step until we get a stopping condition. Okay, so now we have an algorithm. We just have to define these two paraboling concepts of optimal that we want to apply. One is the optimal predictor, and the other one is the optimal threshold. Of course, the devil is in these two details. So let's see which splitting criteria we can settle with. So the idea is that we are in a certain region. Okay, for simplicity, we can imagine that this region has boundaries aligned to the axis in some sense, and then we have to decide how to choose one of the axes and how to split it according to a threshold, so that we increase increase the performance of the model. So one criteria that we can decide whether we want to split or not will be the purity. Okay. Again, some of these terms they might get me in trouble in this case. Okay, so I don't want to talk too much about purity, but the idea is that you will, again, in the case of binary classification, you will see how many of one class you have, how many of another class you have. If this proportion is too close to half-half, then you know that the region is not very useful because it's not really discriminating effectively. So you might want to split it. Also, we should look at the something to do with the number of points, because we know that we don't want to end up with a large number of regions that have no dataset point inside, because this is not a good indication. Okay. Of course, we know that when we will do inference, then we will follow the tree decision tree, and we will end up in some of the region during inference time. And so what we currently have in the dataset does not preclude the fact that we could have a point in the decision region during inference time that we never saw in during training time. Okay, so there could be a region which is empty in terms of training points, but during testing time we have elements that end up in the testing in the region during testing time. But of course, as a principle, right, as a useful principle, you will say that, well, if a region is empty during training time, there is a certain likelihood that during test time it will also not be particularly informative, not be particularly useful. Very good. Okay. So let's say that we have J numbers of predictors and K classes. Okay. Then so we have J number of features. So we selected the J predictor and split the region containing n number of training points along a certain threshold for the parameter, for the feature J, and we call this threshold T of J. Then we can assess the quality of the split by doing as follows. We can see what is the classification error that we make in the newly created region, so which is R1 and R2. So we can say that the error of classifying the ith element along the J predictor when the threshold is chosen as Tj is 1 minus max k, p of k given Ri. That is the large, I take a max of the class index k, and I see how many, what is the probability that the k, where the proportion, what is the proportion of the training points in the original region, in the region Ri, that are labeled as a class K. Okay, so I want to see what is the misclassification error for the class K in the region Ri, so R1 or R2 that I make, and I call this as my error. Okay. So let's do an example here. I say that we have an original region, and then we split it along a certain axis. Region 1 is 0, 6. So he has 0 from class 1 and 6 from class 2. So the error that we make in this region is 0, because we can give to this region a label 2. And when we do this, boom, there is no error that we make. If we classify all the elements in region 2 as in region 1 as being class 2, then we make 0 errors. Then the other region would be, for example, 5, 8. So 5 from class 1, 8 from class 2. Then the error that we make are the misclassification error, right? Because most of the elements, right, belong to class 2. So I can either give class 1 or class 2 as a label to this region. So if I give you class 2, then I will make an error of 5/13. If I give it class 1, then I make an error 8/13 times. Okay? And so I take the max of this, meaning that I will assign the label to this region that will consider the smallest error. In this case, it will be 8/13, so that the error that I make is 1 minus 5/13. Okay, so the errors that I make is all the class 1 elements that got assigned to class 2, because class 2 was more numerous in region R2. Very good. Then you have to average between the errors that you make in these two regions, and of course you will take an average. We take into account the number of elements in the region. So n1 is equal to 6, n2 is equal to 13, and then we see the number of errors that we make. We average this together, and then we take this as a number. So then we have to assess the quality of the splits. And what people use sometimes is this Gini index. And this Gini index is basically goes back to this equation that we had, right? But instead of taking the average, it takes the sum over of the probability squares. Okay, so the region why the square is there, it's not immediate to gather. Okay, there is an economical interpretation. This Gini guy was an economist. Yeah, so I'll leave you this for your research. But basically, it's very powerful. This Gini index is very powerful. It's less obvious than one people might consider. So then if you take this squaring, then we go and when we do this averaging, then you will see this sort of the effect of the squaring in this averaging here. And yeah, you will go on with this, right? So the idea is that there is no exact way of doing this operation, right? As we said, these are policies that we are applying. We want to construct a tree dynamically, so this is equivalent to a choice of a hyperparameter. So there is no really right or wrong solution in this case, right? So we saw a pure error perspective, right? We saw the Gini index where we have the square. Sorry, guys. And we can also look at the information theoretical interpretation. And this is the information theory is what I did my PhD on many months ago. So the idea is that once we do the split, right, we want each of the subregion to represent only one class only. Okay, and you can say that if there is an element in this region that is mislabeled, this corresponds to some sort of noise that has affected your measurement process. Okay, let's say that you're classifying lemon and oranges. It is possible that an orange is super small and a lemon is super large. So they get misclassified, but this is connected to some idea of error being committed, right? A mistake being made somewhere in the process. Okay. So you can imagine that there is a true signal, and the true signal corresponds to the class which is applied to the region, and there is an error, which is everything that puts elements from other classes in this region. So one way to measure the strength of the signal is this entropy, which some of you already see in your own project. And the idea is that if you're given a random variable x, then the entropy is h of x minus p of x log 2p of x. Now, I bet that some of you are not familiar with what a random variable is. I would love to give you maybe about 6 or 7 years of classes on what a random variable is and what probability distributions are. But we are together only for a semester, so for the other 6 years and a half, you have to come back to my lab. But anyway, the idea is that the entropy will be large if the random variable is sort of flat, so if you behave uniformly, right, then the entropy will be flat. And this will correspond to the idea that the samples are less predictable, because the most random variable that you can have over a finite support will be the uniform distribution. But if the entropy is low, right, so it means that there is a stronger signal, right? It means that the distribution is more concentrated. And so you can use this measure of the distribution of the samples in a certain region, in a certain class, in order to come up with a criteria of purity. Okay? So the idea is that we have J number of predictors and training points and K classes. So what we do is that we obtain the distribution of the class K in the region Ri. Okay, so this is the distribution that we have, and we look at the entropy of the region I for the predictor J and the class K. Okay, so this is it. And so this is, let's say, computational equality with actually the conditional entropy. Doesn't matter too much now for us, but the idea is that the larger this number is, the more random is this region, the more uniform is the distribution of the elements in the region, and the smaller the entropy is, the more concentrated, the more again pure, maybe it's a word, the more deterministic, it's a better word, the class is. Very good. So again, just the example. So here we have the two classes, 0, 6, and 5 and 8. So we do the entropy of the first one, so 6 over 6, 0 over 6. Here there is a beautiful trick that there is a log of 0 times log 0. And here we take the interpretation, the asymptotic interpretation, where 0 log 0 is equal to 0. And then we have 1 log 1, which is equal to 0. So the entropy here is 0, which means that the entropy is very low. So we said that this is very deterministic as a region. And then we have 5 and 6. We do this entropy. This becomes 1.36. So it's very high, or as well as we can determine high in this setting, right? Doesn't matter. But this means that it's more random. Okay. And then once we have to sort of give an index that weights the entropy of the two regions, we usually gain this averaging process, and 1 over n entropy 1 and 2 over n entropy 2, and this will give us our measure of performance. Okay, and then the rest of the story will go as you guys expect. So what you do is that you assign a class, you start from 0. You decide an index of purity. You have to threshold this index of purity, and you keep splitting until the threshold of all the region falls behind the target purity that we want, and then we stop. And this is the tree that you obtain. Okay, good. So let me switch the set of slides. You go to slide 2. Any questions so far? You let me know. Back we go. So what we can do is that we can try to, for the case of two classes, right? Sorry, for the case of one class, what we can do is that we can try to represent so for one region and two classes, what we can do is that we can draw the distribution as a function of P, where P is the proportion of elements from class 1, and the elements from class 2 are 1 minus P. Okay. So what we can do is that we can put on the x-axis the proportion from 0 to 1 of a certain class, and then we see what is the value of the criteria that we discussed so far. One is the misclassification error, one is the gene index, and the other one is the entropy. Okay. Not by chance, let's say, or when p is equal to 0.5, this is when we have the lowest purity, and all these three measures, they achieve the same maximum, which is equal to 1. So the misclassification error is 0.5, of course, because it's fully random. The Gini index is 1, it's also equal to 1, and the entropy is also equal to 1. And when the purity is complete, so when you have all of one class or all of the other, this means that your P, the ratio of elements from class 1, for example, is equal to 0 or equal to 1, then either class 1 dominates or the other class 2 dominates. And in these 2 points, 1, then what we have is that all these indices are equal to 0. So what happens is that when you plot these indexes for the case of 2 classes in one region, then all 3 of them will be pinned at 0 at 0, 0, and 1, 0, and they will be pinned at 1 at 0.5 and 1. And what you do is that you can observe the sort of the scaling of the penalty as you move away from the fully uniform distribution, right? So the misclassification error decreases linearly, so very slowly in our, it decreases linearly. And then the Gini index, it's flatter, and the entropy is even more flat. So the penalty for moving away from the uniform, it's very low. And you can also notice moving away from the purity at 0 or 1, or focus on 0, you see that the linear is very slow, where the misclassification error. Gini index, of course, has a linear gradient, right? So it has a quadratic trajectory. And then the entropy is super quadratic, so the penalty of the entropy is the harshest. So you want to keep in mind this penalty, because it tells you how aggressively, okay, the different criteria weight the purity of a certain subregion. Okay, how aggressively they behave. Of course, always be mindful that when you go to higher dimension, you cannot. The plot will be much more complex, but you can bring on the understanding from the lower dimension to the higher dimension. Okay. So the thing to remember here is that the fact that the entropy is the steepest, which is the highest penalty for impurity, doesn't mean that the model is better, right? Because remember that we are always fighting. We're not fighting impurity, right? We are fighting overfitting, okay? Because of course we're going to fix a threshold on the entropy, and as we fix the threshold, this is going to determine the total height of the tree that we build. And what we want to do is that we want to prevent the entropy, the tree from being very tall, because tall trees are overfitting trees. And so so being aggressive is not always a solution. Okay, so you just want to have some dynamics which, for example, keep the tree balanced. Okay, so you're happy if a tree is more balanced, so that, let's say, all the paths from the root to the leaves are sort of at the same length. You're happy if there is a sort of uniform quality among the regions in the leaf. And so these are the type of consideration that you're interested in, not how big is the penalty for impurity, right? Otherwise, you would just say, well, either the purity is 0, or as soon as you move away from 0, then the penalty is 1. But this will not be a very useful criteria, okay? Because it will tell you to always split the leaves, and then this will lead to a very tall tree, for example, and this will be a very overfitting tree. Okay, so remember, steepness won't matter. Okay, so we are there almost. So we discussed these 3 criteria. Of course, in the literature, there are a million others. Everything has a purpose in life. So different jobs will require different splitting criteria. This is just a generally good set of criteria to determine. And now we go back to the discussion of variance versus bias. Okay, so if we don't terminate the decision tree learning algorithm manually, the tree will continue to grow until each region defined by the model possibly contain exactly one training point of the model and attains 100% accuracy. So the done thing to do is to let the algorithm run until each of the points in the training set is in a region of its own, basically. So to prevent this from happening, you have to stop the algorithm at a certain depth, and we have to find a good way to determine this depth. And this is the classical, the classical picture that you want to see, right? So depth 4 all the way to depth 10. Notice that, as I said, the number of leaf nodes is it was exponentially with the depth in a binary tree. And so by the time that you get to depth 10, then your decision regions are completely overfitting, right? So you know that you understand here the type of boundary that you want to draw. It's a circle. For as generous of a definition of a circle you can manage with perpendicular separators. But the idea is that you start from a square, which is very unsatisfactory, and then you keep splitting and splitting and splitting until you get to this type of shape in which you are chasing whether a certain single point is inside the decision region or not. So we have to make some observation. So high bias. So the tree of depth 4 is not good because it is unable to capture the circular shape of the decision of the true decision region. Let's say the decision region that we wish we had. So this is a low bias because then the opposite is the low bias. So if you have a tree of depth 10, then you see that the boundaries are zigzagging in and out in order to catch or leave out a single point. So this is clearly not interesting. Low variance. So the tree of depth 4 is robust to slight perturbation of training data. However, you choose your training data versus your test data during, let's say, your cross-validation. Roughly, the tree of depth 4 is going to always be there, right? Because it's the best rectangle that contains your data. And a high variance is the case in which you have a very deep tree, because as soon as you even partially modify the training set, then all these zigzagging in and out will end up hurting you. And what is the best way, as we said, to decide the maximum depth? As always, is cross-validation. So as we discussed already, cross-validation is a price to pay, because we might not pay the price in terms of data for validation, but we pay by repeating the learning algorithm multiple times, so we pay in time. Okay? When we don't pay in data, we have to pay in complexity and time. Again, what can you decide? How can we decide when to stop? So one criteria is to fix a max depth and do cross-validation of the max depth, or you could do something a little bit more heuristic. So you can stop if all the instances belong to the same class. That's not very intuitive. I mean, that's very intuitive and not very smart. Don't split if the number of samples in the region falls behind a certain boundary. Don't split if the number of leaves will exceed the predefined threshold. Of course, everything has been tried in the literature. A more restrictive condition would be to define a certain gain. And so you don't split the region if the class distribution of the training points inside the region are independent of the predictors. Okay? So if you keep splitting and so if you keep changing predictor and the point distribution remains the same, then it means that there is no more information from the feature that you can use to split. And what you can do is that you can compute the gain. You compute the gain in purity, information reduction, or entropy when splitting region in R1 and R2, and you can call the gain as the delta R, whatever your measure of merit is. and you take the original measure of purity, and then you subtract this average version of the same purity but evaluated on R1 and R2. And if this gain R, right, of splitting is too low, then you just don't split. Very good. So let's see again numerical versus categorical attributes. How do we deal quantitative versus qualitative data? Sorry, guys. So the compare metric works well for numerical data. So we can say we can set some region. Usually we will say larger or smaller. This is because we want to have a region which is aligned. It's aligned with one of the hyperplanes. Or what if we have a categorical thing? Of course, we can encode the categorical value into numbers and treat them as a numerical value, but this is not really very smart. So what we can end up doing is to do one-hot encoding. We know one-hot encoding is very useful, but it's very memory inefficient, because if you have 10 categories, you have to need 10 one-hot encoding. So the size of the variables increases very quickly. And so, yeah, so if you have categorical attributes, you can decide based on a single value of an attribute being equal to something, or you can have a set. So you can say, well, I split if this belongs here or there. And of course, this just adds complications because you have more parameters for your choice, and the more parameters you have, the more you risk to overfill. As always, it's always our mortal enemy. Okay, very good. So here's the classification tree. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? If you guys are good, otherwise we move forward. You can do a little bit of bagging for like 30 minutes. And then we move on with life. Let's do one more. Okay. So a little bit more. Let me see. Decision 3B. View screen mode. Just something small here that we want to discuss. No. Wrong. This one. No. I'm stuck in the wrong window, guys. So a bit dumb today. Yeah. Boom. Share. Here. So let's try to visualize now a case of regression. Okay, because we discussed this decision tree for classification. Of course, there is no reason why we cannot use them for regression, because we said that what we could do is to simply have a linear regression in each of the leaves. So you see how you will naturally now have a sort of mixed model, right, where you do linear regression of the leaf, and then for all the people that get into a leaf, you will train a linear model, and then this will give you decision boundary, which is probably more interesting. So let's see how it goes. So the idea is that now you will use it for regression. So the loss that you take will be the following loss, right? When you get to a leaf, you train the optimal linear model for the leaf. Then you do the prediction over the leaf and over the elements in the leaf. So that you can train the linear model for the leaf only. We will have to rediscuss the splitting criteria and how to perform prediction in each leaf. Okay, so let's see a little bit what is the blueprint for a prediction using regression trees. So you traverse the tree until you reach a leaf node. Then you do this for the whole data set. Then you take all the people that got in the same leaf, and what you do is that you take the response with the average of the response of the leaf, and you call it y hat. Of course, you don't need to settle for the mean. You can also take a linear regression. For the next example, let's do this. So let's say that this is our data. Notice that we have an x and a y as usual, but this is a regression problem, so we don't have dots of color blue and red. What we have instead is a line, right? That it's following a certain set of pattern. And it's clear that if we try to do a linear regression, right, we're not going to be successful. If we do polynomial regression, it's also not going to get us successful until we get to some very large polynomial, at which point we will be doing overfitting. So let's try a different approach. So the idea is that we fix a max depth of 1. As we change the threshold, right, we will be creating a different split in the data. And once we obtain a split in the data, we train, we look at the different responses, and we give the average response as being the predicted label for that y. So in this case, right, so we get, for example, the threshold here, means that the data is partially above the blue line, partially below, so it's clear that we want to pick this blue line as our predicted variable y. And if we look at this region here, then generally you have higher value, so you will take this as the average. Is this good? Is this bad? Of course, we can do better. We can have max depth of 2. If we have max depth of 2, then we have 4 leaves, so we can have 1, 2, 3, 4 leaves. In each of the leaves, we just take the average of the response. So now you see that this this region is being split in 2, a more higher value and a lower value, and then still the 2 high value points. And then it's clear when you go to the max depth of 3, max depth of 5, max depth of 10, then the number of regions grows exponentially, and so you end up having this very jagged region, and this reminds us very much of the K&M problem, right? When you choose a different number of neighbors to be too large, so we know what is happening here. So basically, when we get to k equal to 10, then we are fully overfitting, and it's clear that we are just chasing point by point. And if we had to change how we select our training set, then the function would be very different. So bias and variance trade-off. Very good. So we said that something that we have to do is that we have to redefine the stopping criteria. So we can define a gain for the region R when being split in R1 and R2. And we can choose this to be the following, right? So we have the original MSE of the region, and then we have the weighted MSE of region 1 plus region 2, and the weighting is the number of elements in region 1 divided by the total number of elements. And here again, we go back to the MSE, because if you're doing regression, we know that there is a measure of distance, which is our beloved L2 measure. Okay, good. So now we can do a little bit of pruning. I suggest we do a 7 minutes break. We just walk around, drink some water, and then we do the pruning part, and then we go for the day. Okay, so see you back in 7 minutes. Hello guys, we are back. Let me just figure out how to do full screen. I'm a little bit slow, as usual. It's the full screen. Hey, full screen mode. View full screen. Okay. Okay, very good. So we did all this, right? So we discussed regression trees. Of course, we just covered this algorithm very quickly, right? So many modifications that one can do, and I mean, there is a lot to study. Just remember, this is only a lab, right? So my goal is to expose you to some of these concepts, and it's your responsibility to find the knowledge that you need for the purpose that you want to achieve. Okay, so let's discuss about stopping condition. So the idea is that, of course, you don't want to stop too early or too late. This is the usual variance bias trade-off. So what you want to do is to observe different stopping criteria, see how things go, try to make sense of what you see, use cross-validation to decide. And another approach, which is very favored by as a general philosophy, right, is that you are happier to start with a complex model and then simplify the complex model, then choose the initial complexity of the model. Okay. Also, when you train, let's say, neural networks or SVMs or other type of networks, it's usually understood that often you will get a better result if you fix a model as your starting model, and this model is complex, right? So you train a very complex model, and then what you do is that you try to simplify the model by sort of sparsifying, pruning, simplifying the original complex model. And this is done sort of with the understanding that if you have a complex model, the complex model could learn some complex patterns and some useless patterns. So if you can identify the complex patterns that the model identifies and get rid of the dumb ones, then you have a model which is better than a model that didn't have the chance to study the complex models. Okay, the complex patterns. Sorry. So this is sort of the philosophy that people have embraced at different levels, let's say. So again, we start with this. Of course, this is not very good at classifying oranges and lemons. So what you might want to do is to do something like this. So you start with a much more complex model. And then what you do is that for each node, you check the number of samples, the values, the purity, the Gini index, blah, 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 blah. You go back. And then let's say you focus on this, right? So you see this one here. You see that this one here, it's nice, 7-0, right? So you don't need to go on because it's perfectly pure. But this 8-8, it's really bothersome, right? Because it's uniform. So you split it again, you get to 7-1, 1-7, okay? And so what you do is that you train whatever you remove whatever is below this, because if you get to 7-1, that's already good enough for you, right? And when you go to 1-7, maybe you're bothered, your Gini index, it's still pretty, if you do one step, you can get a better Gini index. And so basically you remove again. Okay, so it's clear that by letting the model evolve, you could see what is the usefulness of keep pruning a node, and you might decide, well, this is not very useful at all, let's get rid of it. This will result in a tree which is very unbalanced. There are some very long paths that are very high complex decision region and some simple one. And this is somewhat desirable to you because it's better than if you started with a fixed depth of tree. Okay, and this is always the figure that we like, right? This is one is overtraining, undertraining, and let's say optimal training. Here we have the accuracy from low to high. Here with the error from low to high. And then we have test and train. So you always want to end up in this middle point, but generally it's hard to know when you have passed your optimal number of nodes. So what you do is that you go to a full tree. Let's say you want to be extreme, but generally you go to a very complex tree, and then you turn back to a simple tree, and this could bring you closer to the optimal point that if you have chosen a good early stopping criteria. Why? It's sort of a rule of thumb, right? It's an understanding that we have gained after having played around with this topic for a while. Good. So there are many methods for pruning. Common is the cost complexity, where you select an array of smallest subtrees of the full model that optimizes the balance of performance and efficiency. So what you do is that you have the tree, you have the error, and plus you have a regularization of the number of nodes. Okay. And so what you want to do is that you want to keep the number of leaves in the tree to be small. And so you keep pruning with this objective function that on this alpha times t promotes a node with very few leaves, and this error t promotes a node which has a very high accuracy. So by balancing through the parameter alpha these two objectives, then you can get somewhere nice. Okay, then this is the example. You take a subtree, you see what is the error, you see the number of leaves, and then you decide and you repeat, and you go on like this. So the idea is as follows: you fix a certain alpha, you find the best tree that minimizes this composite cost. Then you change alpha, you do cross-validation until you find the best alpha. And when you find the best tree, then you're just happy and you go home. So you start with a full tree. You replace a leaf node, a part of the subtree with a leaf node. You check what is your delta error and delta number of nodes, and then you decide if you want to you iterate over different other subnodes, and then you repeat this many times until you get to the selection of an optimal subtree, which you can test by cross-validation. Okay, the message is clear, right? So if you're happy to pay with the complexity of this, then you can do cross-validation to your heart desire until you get to the best tree. And that's it. Yeah, I think, should we do bagging, guys? Should we do bagging? Let me ask, do you guys want 20 means more, or do you want to enjoy the cool weather? 0/1. I think this is a less obvious question. I think we could do a final discussion on bagging. I think it's up to you guys. Yeah, guys, let me know. I prepared the slides regardless. Bagging is cool. Now, guys, vote a little bit. Otherwise, I keep going. Yeah, I have a bias toward. Keep going, guys. Otherwise, I have a bias toward continuing talking. You know. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. 3, 2, 1. Okay, guys. I think it's okay. So let's stop here for today. There is a final thing on bagging, but I think we already did a lot. So next week we have the challenge. Again, apology for not posting, but I'm happy that you guys had a relaxing time without having to deal with the challenge. I'm going to stop recording now. So we say goodbye to the people in the future. And then if you want to ask me something,